Hi, and hope you and your loved ones are safe and well anywhere you are. I'm Dr. Amin Kaboli, lecturer at EPFL, business consultant and executive coach, and I have an honor and pleasure to discuss about the future of consumer goods post-COVID, or as DT said yesterday, post-lockdown, with Mr. Jacek Olczak, Chief Operating Officer of Philip Morris International. Thank you very much, Jacek, for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
I
So
hope,
yes,
we're gonna have an interesting conversation.
I'm very much looking forward. Thank you for your time. To start with, Jacek, how has COVID-19 changed the nature of what you do and how you do it?
Wow, that's the very big question, actually. I mean, we all having presumably, and I guess many people in the audience will have about the same sort of an observations. I mean, initially when the whole thing started unfolding, obviously everyone is, taking care of its, near type of an environment. So obviously in our case is, was the safety, was the security of our employees. How do we let people work not from the office, but very often, from homes, from remote locations? How do we ensure that these parts of the company which, continue allowed to continue to run the proper safety, hygiene, etc. protocols are, followed? And, the companies like ours, presumably many others, you always have this business continuity type of the plans prepared just in case something happens. Now, true is that, many companies have put the pandemic and the things like virus, etc. in the risk assessment. But this was like, lying on a PowerPoint, and, it's difficult even
The black swan,
yeah, to have, the dry run of this. Usually much more focused on some other, impactful disturbances which you can have in a business.
Exactly.
But actually, I was pretty pleased how we think essentially hours, even the days maximum, the company get reorganized, and then I think a lot of people start reacting. Like normal humans would react, right? So you start taking care of, your colleagues in the office, you start taking care of your partners, in our case, retailers, key suppliers and so on. But it's also very interesting how, that focus, obviously there was a consumer in this whole thing, but this comes like a week later or so, right? So you're trying to see, do I still have ability to serve your consumer? But it's very interesting how the focus was changing from a geographical perspective, right? So initially you start looking for all parts of your upstream supply chain in China, and the whole focus is, how quickly that part of the supply chain can recover. And then there was this moment and you could see the green light that, you have a visibility, you think you have an understanding. Okay, you can manage this whole thing through the inventories, maybe use more air shipments with the standard, a sea shipment. And the moment when you think the whole thing is over, the crisis travels to Europe, right? And, by the time, a week later, you realize, okay, the whole world is essentially in the crisis. There is a massive disruption, obviously, to the supply chain. But, at the end of the day, I mean, at the companies, I don't think it's only us, you realize that the lesser of the problem is is the robustness and the reliability of your supply chain. Because with the help of, of the plans which you had in place, etc., you could essentially come back to the relatively standard level of performance. But then you realize that a lot of changes has happened at the consumer level.
Exactly.
Okay, at the trade level, so the last mile, including the consumer, that then you could observe, well, the world is completely different than it used to be. So when people use the language, this is a global crisis started with health. I said, yes, it is a global, but in reality, you have emanations of this crisis country by country, right? Because the situation has unfolded, in the different times, and the different actions have been taken by the local authorities, right? The health, the governments, etc. And I actually think it is, my observation is, yes, it is a health-driven crisis. Things shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, a lot of people, died. However, in reality, this all quickly went into transform into what I call the mobility crisis. We never paid that much attention how mobility is important in our day-to-day lives. And actually, if you go back to the centuries, mobility was one of the driving force of the progress, right? So that the geographical distance was getting shorter and shorter. We could travel longer, faster, and so on. And we have a lot of micro trips, which we are taking every day, right? You're living at the outskirts, your office is in the city center, but 20, 40 kilometers commuting every day one way even is not a major obstacle. And all of a sudden, all of these things get dismantled, right? Because you have a lockdowns, you have a quarantining, you have a social distancing. So, my opinion, the real impact is that we're changing, or at least at the time of the peak of the COVID, we completely changed the mobility of, many people. Now, mobility actually was underlying factor or determining factor in our consumption patterns. We never look like this, right? And you have these rituals. I mean, at the morning, I wake up, I have my coffee, I buy my newspaper, for those who still like the paper versions, in the kiosk, I am in the bus stop, take the bus, go to the office, during the lunch, go to the, for a sandwich or for the lunch, to the coffee corner shops. It's a lot of things, of consumption moments, which essentially are being built along our daily journey. But now from one day to another, somebody told you the journey doesn't exist, right? You cannot come to the office, or, I cannot operate the shop, or the cafeteria is closed, and so on and so on. And this starts driving a huge impact on the consumption, just by the fact that our daily routines got changed. And we have these observations even, before we start this chat, that, what's the point of putting a shoes on if you're working from home?
Exactly.
I don't.
Hi.
Yes. So it's very interesting, actually, how it's gonna unfold. Is is a lot of observations which everyone presumably have. That's actually, you shouldn't maybe say it like this. It's very sad that the crisis. We have a crisis, but the beauty of this crisis, if you are a curious person, is that everyone has an observations about how others, including yourself, obviously, are reacting. And therefore, you can get your own, build your own hypothesis and, draw your own conclusions. And I think if you have a crisis which is more driven, like, 11, 12 years ago, the financial crisis, people were, not maybe everyone was in a positions to really understand what was driving what. I think in this crisis, if you think, behaviors of humans are being changed, of consumers are being changed, those of us who are familiar still with the triangle of hierarchy of needs, of human needs, or the Maslow triangle, right?
Exactly.
I mean, look, we really got the big hit on the very, very bottom of the triangle when it comes to safety, and that's the safety with regards to health, it's the safety with regards to job, income, etc. It's all these forces almost, parachuted on us, and therefore, obviously, you have a massive change in the behaviors. Now, will they stay like this? If the drivers of the change will be removed, remains to be seen. There is this old saying that you cannot enter the same river twice.
Exactly.
So that's most likely we will never get back to where we used to be, because we'll try to take the best out of that situation and, resurrect somehow in such a ways of acting, working, living, which are somehow also mitigating potentially a similar crisis like this one in the future.
Exactly. Thank you. You talked about a couple of points, very valuable points. One was about mobility, and then how we build up the whole journey of our day, like before normal and not in the new normal, around that mobility. And then after we talked about a little bit about the change in the consumer, let's say, behavior, and specifically the driver of the taste, not necessarily the taste change. One of these topics, the changing topic, is the remote work or telework, that office space won't be utilized for many companies.
Yeah.
How do you see this, like workspace? How would be this let's on the coming month and years?
Look at our company at PMI. I remember in the past, various attempts in the projects of how to, inject more flexibility in the way we're working, etc. Yeah, we had some success, but definitely nothing spectacular. And I think here within 1 week, we achieved what we couldn't even dream about achieving in the past. Now, jokes apart, look, there is a group of there's a number of the roles in the company and, number of individuals in the companies which definitely enjoy working remotely, that, having this rigidity of, 8 to 4 p.m. coming to the office, commuting, all of this fine. There is a lot of waste, if you think, okay, in a daily routine. Okay, some other people, they really are they really rather go back to the office. It's very much also driven, what is your personal situation? Do you have conditions, proper environment at home when you can work, when you can focus, concentrate, etc. So what we observe now, that there is quite a group of employees who don't want to return to the office just because they found that, they actually can fulfill their duties much better remotely. There is a group of people who tell you, look, I really want to come back to the office, and you need to accommodate this one. And this is this group in between, which most likely will end up with, maybe Monday, Thursday, and Friday I'm in the office, and Tuesday, Wednesday I'm working from home. One observation which I also had, I am a father of 4 kids, but the 2 kids are living with me. When everyone was using this language, you're working from home initially, I got a little bit upset. I said, frankly speaking, I am not working from home, I'm working from school, because at the same time, kids were not allowed in Switzerland to go to school. And it's this very interesting situations which you never, experience in your families, like everyone is glued to his own screen. You almost start competing on a bandwidth on your internet. You start appreciating that, maybe it was worth taking a bit more expensive offer from a Swisscom to have a good internet. Because when you have a congestion, they cannot continue learning, and I cannot work. But only now, frankly speaking, you could say as you're working from home. But as I said, there's a lot of things which in the past people thought also have to be done through travels, physically have to meet somebody at the distant locations and so on. The miracle happened now. A lot of things we could achieve without the necessity of travel. We had a couple of the interventions required in our factories. I think it was a case in Russia. And we had the machine manufacturers and the staff which were supposed to help them with some installation of the new equipment. The machine supplier is in Germany. The standard protocol was that the few engineers from Germany will fly to Moscow and on site with our engineers calibrate the machine settings. And all of a sudden they get back to they did it remotely. And we actually went back to I could say almost all to Google Glass technology. Now I remember some years ago, we had a project with a Google Glass and how we can remotize some of this work, and the project failed. Project failed. People said, look, this is not convenient. You cannot do this at this level of precision. So whatever number of reasons why not to do it. And all of a sudden now, thanks to a Google Glass and a similar technology, we could do it. So I have to tell you, the necessity of finding alternative solutions have drove also a lot of improvement, and many of this improvement is not just desire of the company as such, is the desire of employees to stay like this. However, we all humans, we are very social animals, and we like this, these intangible interactions which you have. And, when I used to say in our company is that, office for many of us is our second home, right? And the home is nothing else than the house with the soul. And that soul is all the small interactions which you have every day. not the scheduled meetings, not this, process-driven reviews, performance, etc. But all of the small talks which you have, right? The coffee, saying hello, how it is, how it's with your kids, this is what you need as the human. So we need to start thinking creatively that on the one hand, we improve it from a productivity perspective as a response to employees. They desire to work in a more flex type of an arrangement. But on the other hand, we don't lose the social fabric which was built in a company when all of these relations do matter at the end of the day. Okay, because otherwise, the office is not the office or factory, whatever. It's not just the place when you come and perform work. You come and you perform your work, but there is something in addition to these things, which normally we don't pay attention. But I think it's very important going forward.
Absolutely, which is the social interaction, and then, as you mentioned, connection and bonding with each other in the workspace that creates. This is, as you mentioned, this change has two phases, or the ecosystem creates, or change in the ecosystem creates new space. It's some temporary, probably for some of the people is not good. For some new, let's say, innovation and some new, let's say, solution in this space would be good as well. So how to be an effective leader in such situation, in your point of view?
Well, you cannot lose you have to stay focused on what really matters most in a given point of time, right? Because somebody really has to make sure that the organization stays on the course and is not getting, thinking is not getting diluted into the things which seems very important, but they're not necessarily urgent. So it's a classical thinking about the prioritization. And usually in situations like a crisis situations, you have a appearance of a number of the new factors which are popping up, appearing every day, and it's very easy to get lost in the details, in this bias, in this fog of information which is surrounding you, and you don't know whether you are dealing with the facts or you're dealing with the opinions. By the way, frankly speaking, initially what all of us have heard about the COVID-19 was a lot of opinions, right? Everyone wanted the facts, but obviously there was not enough data to start sharing this data in the form of the facts. And, the world doesn't like the vacuum, and that vacuum, unfortunately, started being filled up with the opinions. But these opinions were so many times repeated that for many other people, they start treating them as the facts. So they start making decisions on this whole thing. Look, still the debate is out there, whether, you should wear the mask or you shouldn't wear the mask, okay? Whether, you should travel or you shouldn't travel, whether border closures made sense or didn't make sense. I mean, there's a lot of,
exactly.
I think one day you will have a post-fact type of an analysis and people will start concluding, but that's the whole thing. So in a business, it's the same thing. You're being surrounded by even more information with the high frequency. Velocity of the changes is very high, and you really have to take a little bit of a distance to these things and said, okay, what is really the most important, and how do I make sure that everyone in a company is aligned so we don't lose the focus of what is the most important. I mean, that's, I believe, the biggest role of leadership. Another thing is that you really have to be at your best when it comes to empathy. If you don't have an empathy, if you don't, try to understand that, the way you see the world and the you see the situation, might be completely different how your peers, your colleagues, your subordinates may see it. You need to really show this one. I mean, look, this is a human crisis, okay? And people are going through a number of, there's a fear. Right? Nobody understands still, I believe, even today, how exactly the virus works, how the virus spreads. People have a fear. Fear is a very, is a very powerful emotion. I mean, it can paralyze you, and people will make really the very bad decisions. So, it's your role somehow to, start to cool down the situation, okay? But, partially is also having these conversations, understand. Look, I mean, I can, even if you go this video, technology, video conferencing, etc. I mean, a lot of people are working from homes. I mean, they get any interruptions. You have a small kids, they're crawling under you. Look, our kids think that if I stay at home, it is a weekend. That they think it is a weekend. They don't understand that this is a working day.
Indeed, at the very beginning, it was very hard. What day you are? Like, it's just like you lost the time and the space for sure. Yeah.
So I think it's on the one hand, you have to really, stay on the focus. You know what is your objectives. You know what is your strategy. Just make sure that the most critical, directions are being maintained. Help people to prioritize very quickly, but really be in the much more frequent contact with your troops, so you could really start understanding where the potential issues may come. Actually, if I compare to how frequently I had the contacts with my, direct reports before COVID and during COVID, I mean, the frequency has increased by 3-4 times of our, contacts, and we don't really mind. I mean, we actually like it because we're getting alignment faster, right? And that's very important, especially if you're, running a very sizable business.
Absolutely. So I have two takeaways from from this question, which is basically the first one is prioritization, which is definitely the high skill of senior executive. Second is empathy. We have a question from the audience, which is a little bit ahead of our discussion. It goes to this digitization and technology. We hear that the question is, we hear that digitization and technology can help organizations be more resilient, flexible, or adaptable. But how realistic is that when you take it into consideration our legacy technology and complex IT architectures?
That's one of the reasons why every smaller company or startup has at the very beginning advantage over the large legacy type of organization. I mean, we're experiencing this in Philip Morris as well. I mean, that sometimes it's the same reflections if buy the apartment, buy the house, and you decided to refurbish it. And then you're living with the consequences of what everyone else did to your house before. And you have this moment of reflections, why don't I sell it and buy the land and build it from scratch? And it's the same thing. So yes, obviously, by the fact that you're starting something from scratch, you always will go to the best of the available technology, rubber technology, which you have in existing business, which was subject to a lot of improvements. You had the processes which are somehow embedded also through this technology, and it's very difficult to change that legacy. Remember, we all acting and we all getting a fluency by the fact of the repetition. And even if you have a very badly designed process, by the fact that you're repeating this process every hour, every day, every week, you're becoming fluent in that process. And then you can fall into the trap, let me improve this process. But you don't have this objective view, hey, maybe I should completely redesign this process. So that's the difference between this continuous improvement type of initiatives versus a complete, blank sheet of paper approach and redesign it from this. I mean, companies are struggling with this, as I said, including ours. I know executives for the other companies, and they have the same sort of the reflections. Sometimes it's better just to throw this thing through the window and start from scratch. But the reality is you cannot do it. But again, I mean, it's the question of the discipline. Okay, you can be highly innovative, and you can be highly, you can really challenge the existing processes to the very large extent. But you need to be very disciplined to go into the core and question everything. You're not doing this yourself. You have great people around you who've got it. Usually, my experience is that the younger the employee is, the better observations he or she has about, these improvements. Because, people who are with you for 10, 20 years, they are great. They will be absolutely great when it comes to the improvement of the process. Mm-hmm. But you go to somebody who is a little bit, fresher to the organization, she doesn't understand this is actually very helpful. All of these details, which at the end of the day may not, don't have to be that important, they will actually be much more open-minded to challenge everything from scratch. So it's again, here is the good example from that aspect of diversity. If you put all of those people around your problem, you know, in a project, and you mix these experiences, and actually an experienced person has the completely different way of looking, thinking about this whole thing that the experienced person. And you know, you put it all together, you may come up with great solutions. I have many of examples at PMI that, you know, I had the people who were 12, 18 months with PMI, and they were coming to me with the recommendations how to completely change the process. It was in a case of a finance accounting when I used to be CFO. And I have to tell you, I felt bad because I was presumably one of the author of these processes in the past. But actually what they found out, they were absolutely right. But just because they didn't know the legacy, didn't know all of these constraints, which we think are the real constraints, I mean, their brain was completely open. So if you can listen to them, if you create the platform when they can contribute, that they can be involved in the discussion, I mean, you might have a great result.
Very good point. We have another question, which is, I try to a bit give first one or two sentences, then raise the question. One point here is that when we have, during the pandemic, we have social distancing for sure. Social distancing for airlines means probably no middle seat. Social distancing for factories means probably like losing capacity here and different shift of work. How do you translate this? How do you think like the post-COVID production and for our new normal operations, production, supply chain will be?
Well, I mean, one thing, this is assuming that you will not have any dynamics with regards to the globalization, right? And the globalizations, on occasions looming trade wars, etc. Assuming that these things will not be another driving force of in the world, I believe people will go back to the same sort of a setups which they used to have, but they actually will try to de-risk in terms of the locations and so on. Okay, although the global crisis today is showing you that even if you would, the risk is if you have, if you have something, if you have an event which is happening almost simultaneously across the globe, I mean, where you want to go. But I think the first tendency will be, at least in the near future, just to, the risk as far as possible what it is, assuming, as I said, that there is no other, sort of anti-globalization, trade wars, that sort of the things, interventions. At the consumer level, I believe there will be consequences because, people will, if you are being sent on this Maslow triangle down to that almost bottom, to the level of safety, I mean, some of these things will stay. So I believe the social distancing, not in everyday occasions, but some form of the social distancing, this touchless type of transactions, right? People will start paying attention. We don't really to remember this one, but Japan and some other Asian markets, but very much Japan was well known that the people on the streets before COVID were wearing masks, right? And our interpretation, many people from our side interpretation was that, well, they are afraid of the pollution, or they are afraid about, contracting something from others. Actually, they were doing this just in case they were sick, that they shouldn't pass anything to somebody, to somebody else, right? To other people on the streets. That thing was not always in Japan. Origin of the thing was somewhere in the 1900 something, at the very beginning of the century. And this was driven by the very severe, I guess, influenza which erupted in Japan. And from that time, that habit, if you like, or ritual, or whatever you call it, of wearing this mask stayed for more than 100 years. So I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, some of us have a very negative, attitudes or approach to wearing the mask, some not. But you will see that the component of the hygiene and how I can a little bit improve my my daily life from the hygiene perspective. I don't know, washing hands, not touching the things, avoiding the contacts which are not essential. And actually, you might have realized a lot of governments start introducing this language of essential goods, essential services, and so on. And I think that where the essential is coming now, people have reflections on this thing. What is really essential to me? I wouldn't mind going to the pub and, you know, hanging around with my friends. But do I really have to go to the, you know, packed supermarket to do the same way the shopping as in the past? That, you know, I have people around. Maybe I don't feel okay. Maybe I'm gonna spread something to them. Maybe they're gonna spread something to me. I think some of these things will stay. I mean, we have looked into the shops, but it's obviously too early to make any far-reaching conclusions. But the average time of the shopper in the shop now, when they open, is shorter than it used to be before COVID. So, you know, people don't want to hang in the shop. If you want to hang, you hang around, you go to the restaurant, you go to the places, because that's essential for you. That's right. This is, you know, you're again going on a Maslow, one level above. You know, that's, you know, me belonging to the society, friends, that sort of the needs, of the human needs. So this, I don't want to compromise, but I realize that, you know, I can change my habits with regards to other type of experiences, which, you know, I liked before, but I will not like that much going forward.
Indeed, but it changes the consumer behavior and the purchasing behavior, let's say.
Yes.
Partially goes to e-commerce, which is, this partial became like, as far as Ditya yesterday was saying, the load on post became like 80% more by all of e-commerce, let's say, deals, and then the delivery. The other thing is like, people, they would go for essential goods probably. Then it's going to impact some companies, as we talked earlier, Brooks and Brothers, for example, for suits.
Yeah. Brooks Brothers is very telling, a very traditional, you know, very much US retailer. You know, we're not talking about the fashions, because I believe we're not really specialists in the fashion, whatever. They were selling, you know, a business attire and that sort of the thing, some couple of lines of casual. You know, they went into e-commerce. Maybe they were not on the forefront, but they have all parts which you would expect from a today's retailer to have in order to serve consumers. The reason is why they said a couple of days ago, when they announced the bankruptcy or filing for bankruptcy, is that consumer demand change. People seriously start buying less of the business type of attire. Okay, everyone went casual. You know, you look into this whole thing, it is just last 90, 100 days when this whole thing has changed. You could see, you know, how some of these businesses, okay, they're not operating with the very high margins, so the, you know, capacity to absorb the losses or the slowdown in the, or decline in the revenue is not very large. But this is what it is. You will have a lot of businesses which unfortunately will disappear. But also, I believe, as in every crisis, you will have a lot of new businesses, products, services, which will appear. And I believe this is this moment when, if you have a curious people, and there is a lot of curious people, the high curiosity in the world, and they will come up with something that, through observations, they will come up with something which can, you know, improve our life, and, you know, they will build a great business and product lines around this one. That's the great time for, as I said, for people with the very high curiosity. Unfortunately, we had to go through the crisis, but this is what it is. And, you know, travel, you know, the people still want to visit the, you know, foreign countries, still wants to, you know, see the old Rome and go to Africa or other places, or go travel to Asia. Somebody will come up with a different way of traveling, which is, you know, not so, you know, traveling, to be very, very frank, you know, the air travel, you know, before COVID was not also the most of the pleasant experiences. Okay, but, you know, the benefits clearly outweighed the not only the cost, but the disturbance of the travel. I believe, okay, COVID brings a lot of disturbance. We still don't know how airlines going to approach it from a ticket price perspective, all of the things. But I think somebody is going to come up with a solution, because the underlying need that, you know, still many of us would like to go for a vacation, visit friends. Look, we're living in a global world. I mean, more and more people have friends, families, which are not in the same town, in the same country. They're in a different countries, in the different continents, and those people need that connectivity. I mean, we love Zoom and we love all of these tools, but look, the human touch is a human touch, and you will still want to have it.
Yeah.
So the need is there. It's just the questions: how do we satisfy the need?
So it's a very great point. I mean, as we talked earlier, the ecosystem is changing. Therefore, the consumer tastes and drivers are changing as well. For airline, this is the same. As far as I know, it is 20 airlines. Among all of these airlines, 20 probably are profitable. All of them, they're living on this small margin. So imagine what's going to happen for the middle seat if they don't have it, or 35 or 40% probably we have to put on top of all tickets. We have a very good question from audience here. I'm just reading it. Seeing the rise of e-commerce, which is aligned with what we discussed, consumers will have access to brands and products from all around the world. How do you feel competition is going to play out for consumer goods producers or manufacturers? Is it becoming a winner take all situation?
Well, I mean, yes, if you think from a perspective of a one big marketplace, and presumably, sort of a winner is already there. But at the end of the day, just treat it as the channel, and I think there is a plenty of room from within a one marketplace, or two or three, the biggest marketplaces in the world, to still to do your business. Okay, people will adjust to this one. Okay, and look, there will have also concentration of of all trade coming through the one channel. I mean, you have all the challenges coming from the transparency of the pricing. Competition is becoming more. I mean, it's good for a consumer, right? If you think, right, I can go on a screen and I compare and exploit any price arbitrage, including the currency, and how many times you're searching for something on Amazon Deutschland and Amazon UK and Amazon France and Amazon Italy. So that's sort of the things which will be there. I mean, look, I always, we're also going through the significant digitalization of our relations with consumers at my company. But it is not really that this is a wish of the company. It's essentially where the consumer is today. Consumer consumes more of the things today, being the knowledge, being informations, being product, services, etc., in a digital. And that's, the moment when you had, when the smartphones, etc., appeared, I mean, this is where you had the whole accelerations of this whole thing, because it gives consumers essentially access to whatever they want to do 24/7. The beauty of the digital, beauty of e-commerce, beauty of internet is that this is 24/7. And then you can completely reshape your relations with the consumers, and consumer also is more happy. I mean, I look, for those who are living in Switzerland, that they will understand what I would just say, but Switzerland has a very rigid opening hours of the retail, physical retail, right? And Sunday most of the shops are closed, and etc. And it's difficult to do a shopping when you're working, right? Unless you want to take a day off, or claim the holiday day and they go into shopping. Completely different when you go, for example, to the US environment. So I mean, in Switzerland, there is a unutilized potential, in my opinion, of the e-commerce, because you could really get people into the consumptions, into the spend, just by the fact that you keep the shop open, now virtual. US is the question of a convenience, presumably, right? Because anyway, the retail environment is essentially working 7 days a week and a very long opening hours. So there is a different role of the digital in terms of why consumers should be there. But in general, consumer is in a digital. It's very interesting. I came across some data with regards to the telehealth, right? So people are calling the doctors rather than going for the visits. And, the industry, had the business, had the case that, for the moving more of these patients-doctor interactions to the virtual digital world, this is a great improvement with regards to the cost of the public health, system. And as we know, in most of the country, if not all, there's always the questions of the allocation of the budget and, how much does it cost us to to provide the health services to our citizens. So everything is there, it's cheaper, it's better. People didn't want to go there. I think after 10 or so years, if I recall the research properly, only 10% of these interactions were moved to the telehealth. Within 2 weeks of COVID, it jumped to 70 or 80%.
Absolutely.
You see what is happening. I think this is going to stay. And now people will start working, okay, now because I have so much traffic going through the telehealth, do I have a write-ups? Can I, build the technology around it? Can I, give you the, exactly. Can I send you the device which will measure whatever you want to measure? Okay, then remotely I can upload the data and as a doctor give you the advice. So one thing will drive a lot of other things, and I believe, at the end of the day is, good, better for the consumers. It's actually better for that aspect of the economy when it comes to the, cost of the health, social services, and so on, which I believe will be very important because, as we know, governments have reacted pretty fast. If I compare it to their reactions during the financial crisis with regards to the help to the economy, right?
Exactly.
That sort of the things. Now, there was a huge cost, which we all see in the explosion of the state deficits, and I think the governments on the one hand will be trying to see how do I recover that money which I spent. On the other hand, how I can save, because the other opportunities which arrived, which just come, the other opportunities which I observed during a crisis, and I believe the telehealth is one of these opportunities which will be there. If you think about it, you have one technology which allows you to lower the cost, gives you higher accessibility, and is safer because I don't have to stand now in the line of another people in the waiting room to my doctor. So you have 3 or 4 things being addressed by the one solutions, and people will go for this one.
Excellent point. I took some points out of what we discussed so far. There are these trends that we can see in consumer, let's say, change of behavior or taste, or drivers. Telework, telehealth, education as well.
Oh,
that would change. Yeah, that would change. Different to your experience with your kids at home there.
Well, actually, if you think about it, if a kid, I'm talking very much about my 12 years old kid. If presumably at this age, the social interactions is something which he was missing the most from the time when he was allowed to or could go to school, attend the school. But when it comes of just transfer of the knowledge and the interactions with the teachers, etc., I think at least the school he attended, was perfect. So yes, there's the only thing I could see is he was really literally missing the another 2 colleagues, they can play football, that sort of the things. However, this is at his level. Now, if you go especially to the higher educations, do I really have to take the travel to a foreign country, find a place to live? Okay, in some countries on the top of this, make sure I get the entry visa and all of these complications which are there. And, why don't I just pay the fee for access to your knowledge? And as long as they have an access, okay, not on every discipline, sometimes you need to have an access to the laboratory, to that sort of the things. But, many other, to universities or schools, I think it's absolutely doable. So I think that's gonna stay, and I don't know, it's a good for the educational service. I think it's a good again for the students, because essentially have another accelerations of democratization of the knowledge that wherever I am coming from, I have an access to educations. Anyway, the huge progress was done. How many people at these days taking virtual courses? Okay, so
absolutely.
With the much smaller budget, they have an access to information, to knowledge, and so on. So this is great. My personal actual opinion is that we're also living in the times where less and less is relevant just the school which you finished, in a sense of a label, of a diploma. Yes, because you need such a diversity of the experience and the knowledge which you need to have in order to achieve whatever you want to achieve. that democratization of the knowledge through the ease of access, etc., and hopefully this will be followed by the cost of the access to the knowledge, will result that you almost can, cook a knowledge yourself, right? And I can cherry pick among the professor lectures in the different places, and this is my very individual curriculum to what I think I will need. For some professions, some other professions will still require more of the process type of an approach. So if you want to have a good lawyer or the good doctor, that's presumably will stay within the rigidity of having a full knowledge of everything in order for you to be allowed to serve the customer. Mm-hmm. But many other professions, people will be cherry picking components, and if they're still missing something on the go, they will come back. So this concept that universities, you finish the school, you go to college, university, and then you go to work, I think over a period of time starts blurring. You will be in the continuous educations and the continuous work. Okay, because also the world is going much faster. Okay, so
definitely, I do agree. I do 100% agree that this way of classical or traditional education won't serve much. Like probably not overnight going to change, but in the next 10 years or 15 years, we will have much more like module-based and demand-based education rather than really going for all. And toward, at the end, bottom line is making a proper skill or gathering proper set of skills so that it serves for the goal of the activity. What we talk, telework, telehealth, education, definitely going to impact another trend, which is, let's say, real estate. Moving outside of cities, not like all people, but probably to less dense area. This is another point. Or moving to another locations, probably then this going to impact tax, let's say, reform.
Oh, that's a very good question. I think, as long as we're talking about the remotization of work from other locations than from the office, and we're still thinking about the same canton, the same country, it's all okay. But I believe you realize that, people, there's already today a lot of, foreign workforce in many countries, right? And especially in the office type of a location, people will be start, questioning, do I really have to move to the country X? Can I do the same work from a country Y and maybe just back it up with some sort of a travel? If you look from the many tax perspective, the tax residencies laws, I think, will have to be adjusted, okay? Because you will have, again, the migration of the tax income from a country to country. So look, that's guaranteed that the tax authorities in the different countries will start reacting to this one. But that's, again, they have to adjust to the new reality that, for some people, changing the locations from where I live, where I do the work is very exciting. For some people, it's the hardship, especially, when you are, in the, middle of your career, you have a family, kids have a school, and, for the one person changing a job, you have to move the entire family. That's the big cost, that's the big disturbance, okay, in their life, etc. So people will be trying to arrange for this differently. And again, just the simple fact that for the 2 or so months, everyone proven that a lot of things can be done remotely.
Exactly.
Now, why I have to go back? Okay, so that's things will be there. But actually, I introduced at the beginning the subject of a mobility. You pick it up. What we did in a PMI is, again, the younger group of our people. They come up with the concept of a normalcy index. They develop what we call internally the normalcy index, which is nothing else than they try to mix the measure of the behaviors of the consumers from before COVID time, and they overlay it with the mobility data, congestion data, etc. So just in a nutshell, it's, they put the proper weight, etc. This one of these data geeks guys who, try to help the world quite rightly from the perspective of, almost like data science. Presumably I'm abusing the term, but it's going this direction. So they essentially log into, what people were looking on through the Google searches, And with regards to the leisure activities, to the products they purchase, to the specific product which are around the health, like the masks, sanitizers, etc. And they look also how the mobility in the different countries, cities, etc. got impacted, and they put this data together and they develop the normalcy index. So if you consider beginning of the year, globally, the world was on 100%. Around beginning of May, middle of May, presumably something of even earlier, the world has dropped to about 50% globally, right? And now the world is at about 70%. And yes, it come back. But you know, there is a lot of discussions about what sort of a recovery you're gonna see. You're gonna see the V, W, whatever recovery. And I am afraid it's gonna be very long V recovery.
Exactly. It's gonna be either you or something like this taking time.
It's very interesting. We look at this whole thing, and initially when they come up with this, I said, well, I've never seen this before. You know, after a few weeks, when I look at the data, I said that they get something. So we start tracking this country by country. This is across all the group of consumers, etc. And you could see how these things is changing differently country by country. None of the countries came back to the 100%, despite, you know, even Switzerland, right, which we thought that, you know, they managed the number of the cases almost to zero, and at least those living here had maybe that perception. Okay, now we got it. No, I mean, nobody's. I think the best country is at 80%. Couple of Western European countries.
Yeah, true.
But and now let's see how it's gonna go on. So we're gonna be living in this whole thing. Now, if you consider behaviors, because you very much about this habits, behaviors, etc. Now, everyone knows about it, that the repetition is one of the things which drives the behaviors, right? So the more repetitions you have of something, that behavior most likely is going to become your new habit. And I believe that's exactly what we have today at the consumer level during this COVID situation. If this was a 1 week crisis, if there was a 2 weeks crisis, yes, we would change a lot, but we didn't have a chances to repeat it. And now we're living for the month, 2 or 3, depends on the location, through the situations when we repeat a new set of behaviors. And many of them
part of the ritual, exactly, part of the ritual. And then as a famous saying goes, a structure creates behavior. And then when we are changing social distancing, sanitizer, mask, and then all of the safety measures, for sure, it's going to be a new set of behavior. And earlier you mentioned the case of Japanese using the mask. Probably some of us, it will stay with us for next decades, let's say.
I've heard, I can't remember which was the country, it was Poland or whatever, one of the Central European countries. I mean, the incidents, because now we're paying attention to the health and to the hygiene, and obviously we disinfected our hands, on every occasions, right? You enter any shops and you have the liquids, etc. And actually they observe, so usually during this time in that country, they have a higher level of hospitalization among the younger kids when it comes to poisoning or some stomach problems coming from the seasonal fruits, right? May, June, so people are buying the first strawberries, cherries, etc. They don't wash them, they don't wash hands. If something goes wrong, you get it, right? You get a bad stomach. And all of a sudden, first time they realize there is a drop in the incidence because people follow hygiene. Coincidentally, they solve our problem. And I think some of these things will stay. Now, but, how many times our parents told us wash your hands, right?
That's true. No, definitely we have more. I mean, the frequency of washing became higher now.
Yes. Well, if you are in a soap business, that might be a good business now. Who would
exactly.
think?
That's that's a good point. There is a relevant question here from the audience. Which segment within FMCG, for those who are watching, fast-moving consumer goods, do you think will be the most hit during COVID or most suffered, let's say, FMCG cluster?
Well, it's hard to say. I don't have that much of the visibility, so I don't want to form any opinions, which is not really based on too much of the facts. I think definitely, they are the product categories in FMCGs, which have a very high dependence on the situations on the channels, right? So obviously, if your dependence was on the channels like restaurants, a lot of on-trade consumption type of the products, yes, this is a huge impact because that demand is not there, and not necessarily you can satisfy the demand from the home type of the consumption pattern. We all know that you go to the restaurant, coffee shop. They have a good equipment. You can have an excellent coffee. Okay, I know that my friends from from Nestle will say that Nespresso gives you that sort of an experience. But yes, it's a different, you can't consume the same. Okay, beer from the bottle, those who like beer will tell you, tastes differently than from the tap. So you have all of these things which have in place. Some of these things, I guess, gonna come back. What is lost, it's gonna come back because I believe there was a lot of consumptions along some combined with some social settings. So this was a social event. We went after work for the dinner, for a grill, for the beer. This is how our consumption was organized. We still want to have that sort of regain that social aspect. So I believe that consumption is going to come back. Some others, I can say I definitely know either Brooks Brothers who have the problems because people don't wear, it's not FMCG, that people don't wear that many, suits like before. Then definitely if you are Thai manufacturer, you really must have a very hard time these days.
Exactly. At least two of us, none of us have Thai or no Thai. So, these are really valuable points. We've heard about Hertz in June, and there are like 6 or 7 other companies. It is unfortunate, but definitely we will hear more. Recently, I was reading Financial Times. We have 6 active Swiss watch brands, and 100 of them, which are like mainly smaller brands, they're really under danger of or on the verge of bankruptcy. So we have this, let's say, though they are not on the cluster of FMCG, but they are consumer goods, let's say, and but it's very hard to cluster. As you mentioned, we can have 2 main category: those who lost the capacity and they are working probably 2 shifts or so on to just recover. But the recovery is almost to 70%, as your data says. Plus, at morning, I was checking Wall Street journals. It was a recovery of American economy, and it shows like it is still on the mainly 60 to 75% back to, let's say, previous.
And we have to remember that this is an average, right? And always the dangers of looking at the averages. So yes, look, you have businesses which are booming during these times, and businesses which are really, really suffering. Okay, you mentioned airlines, but I believe the whole hospitality sector.
Oh, they're suffering. Yeah.
Look, it's really very bad, and that obviously has an impact on employment, income, security, that sort of the things. But we also have to remember this was in many economies one of the biggest, the important contributor to the GDPs. So you'll have a ripple effect of all of these things because the hospitality sector and everything around them and the footprint, if you take Greece, few other countries, is a tremendous thing. However, good thing is that, this was that part of the thing, was providing that sort of the product or service, which I believe people still would like to have. Everyone would like to have the week, 2 weeks vacation, not too much expensive price, and enjoy it from the family and, reload the batteries for the next crisis. So we will still need this one. Okay, temporary people are a little bit worried about, the safety, etc. arrangements, but I believe that need will stay there. The question is which needs will completely stop existing, because that's gonna have a much more severe impact. And I do believe that there will be some when people say I'm not doing anything else. There's another school of thought that even for the products which, the need continues to be there, people would like to be served in a completely different way. Okay, and I believe that aspect of the hygiene will have to be somehow addressed. I mean, how many people will not pick up the parcel from the postman, but you will quarantine the box in front of your house? You see that thing will be disturbing, and somebody will come and claim that my packaging is, I don't know, virus resistance, whatever claims people's gonna have substantiated, hopefully. That's gonna drive the consumer.
Or one of them, we can say, like grocery shopping, which is like rising anywhere in the world, and definitely in Switzerland as well.
I've heard presumably stories about in some places the resurrection of this return, of the how you call it, drive-in cinemas. When you come with your car, you had this on the movies, right? Hollywood movies.
Yeah, exactly. But this was super huge screen, right?
Yeah, well, honestly, it was a super huge screen, but here is the problem. Okay, comfort of that sort of a cinema arrangement was when you had the big Cadillac and you could almost sit like in your sofa. In the meantime, car industry shrink the car. So now in order to enjoy that sort of a cinema, I should be buying bigger car. The car industry thinks you should have a smaller car. I don't know how they're going to solve it, but it's interesting.
To solve one problem, we are creating two others or three other problems to solve.
Maybe cheap, but the big car is going to be, again, something I would like to, have at least for the weekend, take the friends and, go to the cinema.
So I would love to continue this talk. We are going 2 minutes more than what we asked you for your time. As a last question, what would be the recovery plan, a proper recovery plan for a manufacturer of a consumer good company?
Well, I mean, first, really, you need to well understand how much your consumer has changed. So, trying to say that, okay, I recover the supply chain and the manufacturing and all of these things, and I can, serve the retail and the consumers the way as it is before, I think it would be too risky assumptions to make. So the whole quest is now what really has changed at the consumer level. Mm-hmm. Okay, because it not only to the negative, you may really discover a great new opportunities in the way you're serving the consumers, which will give you, another additional competitive advantage, maybe even for a longer time than the thing. And those who will, this human desire of go back to normal, it's a very dangerous thing, because you need to understand that presumably the normal will never come back. We will have a new normal, right? And what is this new normal? And I get so companies which are truly consumer focused, consumer centric, who've got that consumer empathy, I believe those companies are by definition better equipped to find out what is a new way of how to regain or conquer the consumers tomorrow. Those who will try to treat it as an event which happened for the last 3 months, and month from now nothing happened, nothing changed, and I go back to the normal, I think they run the risk. They run the risk of missing a big time. So my advice is that make sure that your company or people around you are very curious, that they really go back to the what is the most critical in your business. Okay, in FMCG is the consumer. Go after consumer and find out what has changed. And there will be small changes which you will think are not that important, but they driving the change of a behavior, which drive the consumption patterns, the things which they value more and they value less going forward. But most importantly, I wish everyone that we will stay safe and healthy during this crisis.
Exactly. Respecting the safety measures. Thank you very much, Jacek, for your time. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I really appreciate the time that you took out of your very busy schedule and spent it to discuss on this interesting topic.
Thank you, Amin.
Any final prediction, thoughts, or anything that you would like to share with us?
Well, no, I just hope that, one big crisis like this per generation is enough. And I believe, I wish we all will turn okay from a health perspective for all of us, that, vaccine and the treatments will be really quickly, developed. And then we can focus on whatever the new normal is. But I do believe that, none of us has the stomach for another big crisis like this soon.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Jacek.
Thank you.
All the best. Stay safe and well.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Ciao.